In the last section, we created our header component, which currently just shows some text to the user. We then ended the section by using an export statement down at the bottom. The header component structure that you see, the import statement, the declaration of the component, and then the export statement at the bottom, is going to be super common, 100% reproducible, and we're going to use it all over the place for all of our different components. So you're going to get very used to seeing this type of structure inside of our component files right here. Continuing this section, we're going to figure out how to make use of a component that we have exported. So again, export statement means we can now use this inside of other files inside of our application. As I've said several times before, we use multiple components together to create more elaborate applications. To do so, we make use of a practice referred to as component nesting. Component nesting is the process of placing one component inside of another. So these two topics, component nesting and consuming exported objects, really go hand in hand. To get more experience with this, we're going to import the header into the app component, so inside of this index file, and then we're going to nest it inside of the app component. And when I say it, I mean we're going to nest the header inside the app component. So this is going to be a two-step process. First, we're going to import the header, and then we're going to nest it inside the app. So let's do step one first. Underneath the two existing import statements, we'll add a third import to import the header. So we'll say import header from, and now this last statement, this string over here, is going to be a little bit different than the ones we've written previously. Previously, we wrote just React or React Native to say, hey, I want this specific library. But that only works when it's a file that we write, when it's a file that we installed with npm. If it's a file that we have written ourselves, we have to provide a relative path reference to that file. So by relative path reference, I mean we need to imagine that we're sitting inside of this albums folder right now, and I need to make a reference to the header file. To do so, I'll say /, which means start in the current directory, so in the albums directory, then go into the source directory, so src, then go into the components directory, and then get at header. If it's a JS file that we're making reference to, we do not have to put on the .js at the end. We can just place just header by itself. So now I'll go ahead and save this, and boom, that's all we have to do to import a file. I want to draw your attention back to the big difference between these import statements we've written so far. Again, if it's an import statement that is for a library that was installed as a npm module, which is the case with both React and React Native, then we can just write the name of the module. But if it's a module that we write ourselves, we have to provide the path reference for this. So let me tell you a little bit about why that's the case, because that always annoyed the heck out of me. With npm, all module names or all package names are always unique. So we have no uniqueness, we can never make two modules called React. And so when we put just a name of the library, our packager assumes, oh, hey, they must be making reference to a npm module. I'm going to go through the node modules directory and try to find a folder called React. And when it finds it, great, that's what this library must be here. But in the case of files that we write, well, we might have many different files in our application called header. We could have one inside the components directory. We could also have a file called header inside of the src directory as well. And so if we just said import header from header, well, the packager would have no idea which header we wanted. It might be the one in the source directory or it might be the one in the components directory. It just wouldn't know. And so that's why for files that we write, we have to specifically say where that file is. Throughout the entire course, I'll make sure to give you a lot of help on whether or not we're using a relative path or just a library name. And in addition, for every relative path that we use, I will certainly make sure to give you a lot of help on exactly what that path is. Okay, so that's step one here. We have imported the header component, and now we're on to step two. We have to nest the header component inside of the app. So to render one component inside of another, it's just treat the imported component like another JSX tag. So I'm going to delete the text tag that we've got right here, and I'm going to replace it with the header. So we'll say just header. Now by convention, if we have a self-closing tag, or excuse me, if we have a tag that does not have any text that goes inside of it, as is the case with this header, I don't intend to place any text inside of here, we turn it into a self-closing tag. And that's what the ESLint rule here is complaining about. It's saying empty components are self-closing. So to make a self-closing component, we'll delete the second tag and then place a / and a closing bracket. So now we get just header by itself, and that's all we have to do. Now notice that when I do this, we are no longer using the text tag up top, right? We're not using the text inside this component, so we can delete the text import now. And we're left with just the header by itself. So this right here, again, is referred to as component nesting, when we take one component and place it inside of another. It's our chief tool for making really complex applications full of a lot of different components. The last thing I want to do is test this out inside of the simulator. So I'll bring the simulator up and I'll refresh it by hitting Command R. If you are on Windows and you're using the Android simulator, you can hit Control R instead to get to refresh. So now you'll notice that, well, the text is still overlapping on the header up here, but now you can kind of tell that it says albums instead of the some text that we had before. So it's still ugly, but at least we got the text to work. That means that the header component is correctly being displayed within the app. So this is great. Let's continue in the next section and fix up the header with some styling so that it looks nice and centered at the very top of our application.